Now, the Law Ministry is committed to creating a task force to look into how people with invisible disabilities can have better access to legal avenues. Such disabilities are not immediately apparent. For example, those with schizophrenia, autism or ADHD. The proposal by Pro Bono SG seeks to formalise channels of communication and identify points of contact for each ministry or agency. There are aims to identify gaps within each body.
Access to justice is not just something that we have as a banner or is a nice policy, but is really the lived and practical experience of people who come to use our legal system in Singapore. We must keep evolving it to ensure that vulnerable persons and victims, including those with mental disabilities, are as adequately supported and treated with fairness, compassion and justice as anyone else.
Pro Bono SG hosted its inaugural Access to Justice Symposium. Topics include ways to increase awareness and mechanisms to better serve those with invisible disabilities. The experts touched on training for investigators and the need to reconsider rehabilitation, treatment and punishment approaches to this particular group. Now, to help us understand this topic better, we have with us Peggy Yee. She is the Pro Bono Ambassador 2023 and 2024. She is passionate about helping persons with invisible disabilities who have to navigate the justice system. Ms. Yee, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So we just touched on what constitutes a person with invisible disabilities, right? Not so apparent conditions, especially those with ADHD or autism. Give us some cases or some examples of how this group may not have full and fair access to the justice system.
Well, persons like that, whether they have mental health issues, special needs like autism, ADHD, or co-occurrence of both, or intellectual disability, their conditions are not apparent to the eye, unlike those that are, for example, a person who's with a disability that's physical, for example, a person in a wheelchair. So we take the example of a person that I shall call Jay. Jay looks just like any other shy, quiet female, but Jay has an intellectual disability. So Jay has been brought by her family to the family's trusted TCM practitioner for supposed holistic healing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as it turned out, Jay was sexually assaulted by the practitioner. And this came to light only when Jay's continuous complaints of pain was being seen by a medical practitioner specializing in treating persons with intellectual disability. And so when that came to light, police reports were made, but concerns were raised about whether or not Jay would be able to testify in court. And ultimately, there were no charges brought. So that's in respect of Jay, who's a victim, navigating herself in the legal system. Then we take the case of a person that we shall call L. L was born with an intellectual disability as well. But throughout L's schooling, he was told that he's looked normal. Schools, social service agencies, and even legal professionals told him that he looked normal. So L was being investigated for harassment and later on for sexual assault and outrage of modesty as well. At the investigation stage, he was not able to provide cogent or clear answers because he could not articulate himself properly. And at trial, his answers were seen to be evasive and uncooperative. So those are the real challenges faced by persons like J or L that I've just raised.
These are very unfortunate incidents, but what is the current situation on the ground? Are we seeing more cases of criminal offences involving this particular group of people?
I don't have the hard data as to whether or not there are more cases, but certainly there is a lot more awareness that there are cases such as this, and this is good for us all as a society, because in the last 5 years, for example, there have been an upsurge of increased webinars, conferences and talks about this topic. So I'm heartened that there are more people who seem to be more aware of this issue.
Now, speaking of awareness, at the symposium earlier today, you called for the formation of a task force to help this group. What should the task force look like, or look into rather?
So I said that was my aspiration, that the symposium cannot and should not just end with everybody saying hello to each other. But we wanted to have, because I said, we can all say that we have empathy, but empathy without action is just sentiment. So what I was looking to have, and I'm so heartened that that the Minister for Law has confirmed his commitment, is to have a multi-agency task force so that you can have points of contact for every agency, and each of these agencies will come together to then identify where are the gaps in capability, and then what can we do moving from here. Because the whole idea is to come together to see what other measures, how can we better the situation for these persons like J and L in the legal system.
What would you say are the key considerations or challenges when dealing with cases involving persons with invisible disabilities?
The reason is this, and the key challenge is this: we must first acknowledge that such persons, when they are navigating the legal system, it's not just an issue between them and the courts alone. There is an ecosystem within which such persons exist. And this would comprise, firstly, of the investigative agencies, the enforcement agencies, the courts. Then what about the social service agencies? What about the lawyers? What about the public as well? So when we recognize that the entire ecosystem comprising all these stakeholders can and should actually come together, that's when there will be a meaningful impact and difference made.
Are you observing any other major gaps in the justice system as far as persons with invisible disabilities are concerned?
I would not claim credit for observing those gaps, but I would say that because we just concluded the symposium this evening, just a few hours ago, and there was much spirited discussion and sharing, during which what was identified was that could there be some measures to ensure court diversion? That means if there are cases involving offenders or victims with invisible disabilities, which covers, as I said just now, mental health, special needs, or intellectual disabilities, can their matters not go to the court? Can we address it upstream? Can we look to see what is the root cause? And can we address that root cause instead of addressing the action itself? But of course, there is always a balance, because we must also recognize that for every offender, there is a victim. So there must be that balance to be sought as well, because it's not a matter of just saying, okay, here's an offender who has one of these conditions, and therefore, he can do anything he wants. That is not right by society either.
This brings us to the next point of rethinking our approaches to rehabilitation, treatment, and punishment. How do you think we should change our approach, and why are these changes very important at this point?
This is actually a multifaceted challenge. And one of the ways to address it would be to look at, for example, can we look at the current sentencing options that the courts have? So when a person is convicted, does he get sent to jail? Is it a mandatory treatment order, which are only available for treatable mental conditions? Or are there other options that can be open to such an offender that can better address the issue? Because right now, what is acknowledged is that the current smorgasbord of, if you will, of sentencing options is really quite limited.
All right. And as you said, we have to show empathy with a little bit of action, isn't it, Ms. Yee? Thank you so much for coming in to speak with us. That was Pro Bono Ambassador 2023 and 2024, Peggy Yee. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.